everybody out.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado, near Knox, moving northeast at 70 miles per hour. The main threats are tornado and half-dollar size hail. This warning is for central St. Joseph County, Indiana, eastern Stark County, northwestern Marshall County, southeastern LaPorte County, and the areas near Knox County. You should be in your safe place right now.
All right, so let's put the radar back up first, the reflectivity, so we can get a sense of what this storm looks like. It is going to look messy on here, but that main storm that's causing the issues is just in Knox right now. As it's moving to the northeast at a very fast 70 miles per hour, that is why this warning has been extended to the northeast, and it's in place for a long time until 8 o'clock specifically. Before we get a sense of where this storm is going, let's put the velocity back on here so we can get a sense of what that rotation looks like, if it's tightened or if it is still broad. And it looks to me, if you agree, Aaron, that it's still rather broad in rotation.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think it's picked up, maybe
a little
3
bit
or 4
of speed,
miles per hour of speed, but it's still looking fairly broad. I'm not seeing extremely intense rotation at this time, but there's certainly some broad rotation in the area.
Right, and again, we've talked about it doesn't take very strong rotation in order to generate a tornado. It could be a rotating thunderstorm, but even just a quick cycle of this storm could produce enough to make a funnel cloud. All right, Aaron, let's put just the warnings on there, but I want to focus on the new warning that has been issued. Talk about especially those areas in St. Joseph County, because I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions. Does this warning include the city of South Bend? And as we look right now, downtown South Bend is not included in this warning, specifically near the airport. Airport's here near Ardmore. You've got downtown South Bend. But if you go south of Jefferson, that is where this tornado warning goes. That doesn't mean that if you are north of Jefferson, you're in the clear. I still want you to take this warning seriously and plan as if the weather is going to get nasty. But if you are driving south of South Bend along the bypass, for example, or on 31, driving toward Marshall County, Fulton County, that is included in this tornado warning. Areas like, there's other areas too. When you get past 23, Crumstown Highway, that's also included in that warning.
Yep, Pulaski County, the tornado warning has been canceled.
Okay, so that's some good news. Pulaski County, you are in the clear now. You no longer have that tornado warning, but that threat has now shifted, and it includes a larger portion of our area. Mainly, we're talking about Stark County, we're talking about Marshall County, we're talking about St. Joseph County. Depending on where you are, you may be hearing those sirens outside. Lakeville, for example, North Liberty, La Paz, Walkerton, Coons Lake. Those are all some larger communities that are under this tornado warning right now. And again, as we mentioned, not all of South Bend is included in this tornado warning. I'm sorry, Aaron, I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. We are able to hear the sirens here now in Mishawaka. So if you're in Mishawaka, the far southern parts of the town is under that tornado warning, and so some of you might be hearing the sirens right now.
Yeah, and depending on where you are, you may be able to hear them, you may not. These are outdoor warning sirens. So this is just one way to get those severe thunderstorm alerts, those tornado warnings. Another may be those alerts on your cell phone. Depending on where you are, you may have heard that really loud noise coming off of your cell phone with that tornado warning being issued. Aaron, this is perfect. Let's look at the velocity data to look at where that rotation is right now. It is just north of Knox. So here's Highway 8, and then here's Highway 39 is to the west. But you can see just north of Knox, that's where that broad rotation is right now. Again, the speed of that rotation is not extremely strong, but we've talked about that you don't need very strong rotation in order to generate a tornado.
And I've just gotten word, I'm going to pull it up here. We have weather camera 1 here in South Bend pointed at the area of rotation. So if there is, let's say, if you're in South Bend, you're looking towards the area of rotation, you will not be able to see this tornado. So if you're wanting to go outside or look at your window and see this possible tornado, look into the tornado warning,
Right.
you will not be able to see it. So we ask that you let us cover the tornado for you, and we'll tell you what's going on, and you can stay in your safe.
Yeah, you can see a lot of rain on this camera right now. That means that if there's any tornado that's out there right now, whether it's specifically near Knox, that's where the storm is right now, but we're likely going to see this wrapped in rain just because we've got so much moisture in play right now. We've had that moisture all day. That was a question, if we were going to get enough sunshine to see the atmosphere destabilize and generate the energy we need for storms. All right, production, if you can put the radar back up. I want to go back there, talk about where those storms look like on radar, because it's definitely a little bit of a mess at times. And that's why we want you to take these warnings seriously, even if you are just outside of that warning. So we'll stay right here on this view right now, Aaron. So that warning, you can see that red outline. I know it's kind of messy with the storms, but just north of Knox, that's where the potential rotation is within this storm, but it is moving to the northeast. You said it's 70 miles per hour, Aaron, right? So that's faster than people drive on these highways. So we're talking the potential for this to move very quickly out of your neighborhood and into the next one.
I'm going to show a quick view away from the radar. The rest of the area has now been added to the tornado watch. So we are going to be seeing the tornado watch for the entirety of the area. This will be going on, except for our Michigan counties. And that will be going on until tonight at 11 o'clock Eastern.
Okay, so this is a continuation of the watch, which was issued at around 4:30 this afternoon. If you joined us on our newscast earlier, we did not have that watch, but now we do, especially as we have these thunderstorms with rotation moving into the area. All right, Aaron, let's put the rotation back on, the velocity data, and I want to widen the view just a little bit so those that maybe were just added to the tornado warning can get a sense of what's coming. I think this view is perfect right here. So here's Knox. I'm pointing at it right here. That's where you have the red and the blues, in this case, kind of the green color coming together, and with it moving to the northeast. Just south of Walkerton, that's probably the next community that will likely see the impact from this storm. Right along US 30 at the Stark and Marshall County line, that's going to be another spot that sees that rotation here in the next few minutes. And then once we get, this is perfect, let's put a storm track on this just for tracking the rotation. Walkerton looks to see that by 7:44 this evening. Bremen could see this by around 7:52. Wyatt, if this holds together, likely by 7:53. So let's put the reflectivity back on here, because we're talking about a lot of lightning with this storm too, a lot of heavy rain. I know that the rotation is the big factor, but sometimes we can see on reflectivity what we're watching. And right where that 30 sign is, that's probably where we're looking for that area of rotation within the thunderstorm itself when we look at it with this particular lens. There are so many different lenses that we can look at when it comes to these storms that we have so many tools at our disposal to talk about what's going on. Aaron, have we gotten any updates from the Weather Service? Any new observations or things like that?
No, right now we're not dealing with any observations of severe weather. Right now we're still just tracking that broad area of rotation near Knox. I'll pull up our velocity for you to be able to show you the kind of the area that we are concerned about right now that we are watching. Let me zoom in here. We are now north of Knox, so we'll take a look up near Davis and Grovertown. That area is what could be currently dealing with some rotation overhead. So if you live in those areas, just know that you need to be taking shelter right now, going up into Walkertown, North Liberty, Lakeville, La Paz, Bremen. You should be in your safe places right now due to that rotation.
Exactly. I know the area of rotation isn't necessarily in your neighborhood, but this is the time to get everybody in the basement, get everybody in your safe place, because these storms are moving very fast. We've seen reports that it's moving at 70 miles per hour. And so that is going to be in and out very quick. Here at the station, we're hearing that thunder outside, and that's because these storms are starting to roll in, and that's probably something that everybody's experiencing, especially those of you who have these warnings in place. All right, let's get back to the velocity data. You can see right near Grovertown, that's where we've got that broad rotation right now. This is where 23 and 30 intersect. So if you're familiar with the highways, it's just south of Coons Lake. Highway 30 is that big east-west highway. So Davis, it is to the east of Davis. This storm is likely going to stay north of Plymouth. If you're in Plymouth right now, I would still be in your safe place. However, that area of rotation likely going to stay along and north of US 30.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to zoom out here and I'm going to show you what the regular radar looks like as well. So the whole area can get a look at what's going on across the area. So we are dealing with that tornado warning. That tornado warning does extend into the southern parts of South Bend and Mishawaka and some of our more populated areas. So many of you have heard or might have been hearing those sirens already. That is because we are tracking this storm that is capable of producing a tornado, currently moving up. It will be north of Plymouth. That's going to be moving around Grovertown right now, Coons Lake, Walkertown, North Liberty, and it's going to continue up along that track.
Yeah, let's keep the view right here. So Walkerton, you are probably within a few minutes of seeing that rotation. So if you are not in your safe place now, this is the time to do so. And again, we talked about how the strongest part of the storm is not currently near South Bend, but southern areas of South Bend, southern parts of Mishawaka, they are included in that warning. So that's why you'll want to take this time to get in your safe place and wait for the all clear, wait for the storm to move through. Another thing, if you are seeing some of the damage or maybe these storms have rolled through and you want to take a look at what's going on, wait until the storms have passed through and you're completely in the clear before assessing the damage. We've got a lot of lightning out there. We've got a lot of heavy rain, and with how fast these storms are moving, things can cycle very quick. And these storms, they don't have intense, strong rotation, but even just broad rotation could spawn a tornado very quickly and very briefly and do enough to do damage. What are we looking at right now, Aaron, in terms of velocity? Where are we seeing the strongest rotation?
Yeah, right now, velocity-wise, well, this is good news. The velocity appears to have broadened out a little bit more.
Good news, yes.
Just north of Grovertown, right between Coons Lake and Grovertown. We have seen the rotation broaden out a little bit, which means that when you see those tighter colors, those brighter colors close together, that means we have a better, stronger rotation. It means that we're more likely to see a tornado on the ground. When we see things broaden out a little bit, it means that our odds of tornado being on the ground are lower. It's not zero. We still need to be in your safe place right now, but this is what we really like to see.
Right, and especially since, these scans that we're getting them every couple of minutes. But in between these scans, you could have a tornado touch down and then go back up. It's that quick that it can happen. And so that's why if you're in the area that has those warnings, you want to take that shelter and take it seriously as you can. So when we put the wind direction and the speed on it, again, combine the two numbers, in a sense, we're probably looking at things around 75, maybe 80 mile per hour winds associated with that storm in that area of rotation. It's not the strongest that we've seen, but definitely something we're watching. You see another scan came through, so it is now moving through Coons Lake, just outside of Coons Lake. You see that darker reddish brown color and that blue color here. They're pretty spread apart. It's not very tight, so that rotation, as we've mentioned, it has gotten very broad, and we look there, the speed has come down as well. The last scan we had, it was closer to 75 or 80 miles per hour. This is closer to 70 to 75 miles per hour. It's not a significant reduction in speed, but anytime we see signs like this, it is a good sign. How is it looking, Aaron, in terms of any hail? Because I know that was an additional threat that was included with these storms. I know the bigger threat today has been gusty winds, has been the isolated tornado aspect, but these warnings did include the threat for some hail.
Yeah, absolutely. That warning does include the possibility of around $half sized hail. Right now, the last hail scan that we got that went through Knox, North Judson, you were getting radar indicates closer to pea-sized hail.
And again, this is radar indicated. This is not ground truth. So maybe if the storm is past your neighborhood, you can relay to us on social media what you've been seeing, how big the hail was, if you saw rotation, things like that, and we can relay that to the National Weather Service. Here's another thing for you, and Aaron, while I'm talking about this, I'll have you put reflectivity back up. With these storms, the two of us here in the studio, we don't have a sense of what's going on outside. We don't have a window to the outside. So if you're seeing something that doesn't look really good, it looks kind of ominous, or maybe you're seeing something in terms of damage. If you send that to our newsroom, whether it's through email or through social media, on Facebook, for example, we can get that communicated to us and then communicated to you folks or even the National Weather Service. And that information can be used in future warnings as these storms continue to evolve.
You can now see that a lot of the area, including Elkhart, Goshen, Syracuse, Plymouth, Warsaw, you're now under a severe thunderstorm warning.
Okay.
There's a tornado possible tag, which means that we can't rule out a tornado or two in this storm, especially a quick spin up or so. $0.5 size hail is possible, and one of the main threats in it is winds up to around 70 miles per hour.
So 70 miles per hour, that's enough to rip out trees from the ground, very similar to what we experienced on Sunday. We are getting a repeat performance today. Let's put the alert graphic up first so we can get a sense, since we've got those new warnings out there, we can highlight those new warnings, talk about what's going on the wide scale, but also what's to come. So big picture, all of our Indiana counties have that tornado watch, and that goes until 11 o'clock. We have some severe thunderstorm warnings. We have some tornado warnings. The newest severe thunderstorm warning is for Elkhart County, parts of Kosciuszko County, eastern Marshall County, parts of northern Fulton County, and then eastern St. Joseph County. This is the same storm that is bringing the rotation that we're tracking throughout the course of the area, but that tornado warning, right now it goes in place for approximately another 13 minutes, but we're going to continue to assess this storm as it's moving at a pretty fast pace. You said it's about 70 miles per hour, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The severe thunderstorm warning is moving at about 70 miles per hour, that aspect of it. The storm that is capable of producing a tornado, moving shortly into St. Joseph County, is moving at 65 miles per hour.
All right, let's put the velocity data up. Since we're seeing that storm move out of one county and into another, let's kind of reassess where the storm is and where it's going. So when we look at data right now, the rotation is very broad, but in between Walkerton and La Paz, that is where we're seeing some very broad rotation. And even when we look at these winds, some pretty strong winds as well. We could be looking at wind gusts, or in these storms, anywhere from 60 to 65 miles per hour, maybe even close to 70 at some point. And we had that just a few days ago. Now, we talked about the direction this is moving. It's moving to the northeast. So here's Walkerton, right on the county line, but it is moving to the northeast at a pretty fast pace. So Lakeville, likely going to see this storm here very soon. La Paz, probably in the next 5 minutes. Plymouth, again, we talked about how that area of rotation is not necessarily going to impact downtown Plymouth, but this is a strong thunderstorm. So by 7:54, you're likely going to feel the brunt of this storm. Bremen could be dealing with it probably by 8 o'clock this evening, Wakarusa by 8:06, and Concord by 8:10. Let's put the regular reflectivity up here for a minute, and so we can talk about where we're seeing the heaviest rain also, because I know that the bigger threat is that velocity, is that rotation, but definitely something that we can watch for when we look at what's going on. This is a pretty large complex and a large line of showers and storms moving through. They're definitely packing a punch. We're hearing the thunder here in the studio. We heard the sirens earlier when that tornado warning was first issued, but the area of rotation and the strongest part of the storm is just starting to move into southern portions of St. Joseph County right now. Are we seeing any updates from the National Weather Service or emergency managers locally as to what's going on?
No, we have not heard anything in terms of damage reports at the moment. There's been some signs of some very, very tiny, near pea-sized hail,
Okay.
Which we were anticipating. That proves radar to be correct. It was in the Knox area. And we do know that it is going to be windy. People are hearing wind going by. It's going to be very breezy. If you're in that tornado warning, you in your safe place. And for all those people in the severe thunderstorm warnings, you're going to be dealing with straight line winds of around 70 miles per hour. And you do have that tornado possible tag on those severe thunderstorm warnings, which means that we could be dealing with some quick spin up tornadoes during that system. So I'm going to be pulling up velocity here momentarily to give people an idea once again of what's going on within that tornado warning. You can see between Walkerton and North Liberty,
yep,
there is
that's
some very
exactly
broad
where
rotation.
the very broad rotation is right now. So it's not that tight circulation, that tight couplet that we're looking for, which is a good sign. That tells us that this storm is either weakening or kind of recycling itself. And that's why we keep watching for updates on these storms as they roll through, because a lot of times these storms will recycle themselves. So they'll kind of fall apart, but then they'll re-intensify. And that's why that warning goes for so long, and it goes pretty far to the north. So the latest scan kind of shows the same thing. Between Walkerton and North Liberty, that rotation is very broad. I also want to highlight what's going on along US 30 right now. If you can see kind of that bow-like feature on radar, that tells me that we're dealing with some pretty intense wind speeds right now. Radar estimated wind speeds of 65 to 70 miles per hour, which goes along with the warning. That is strong enough that we'll likely see some very strong wind speeds, which could rip up trees, cause damage to homes, bring those trees on top of cars, blocking roads. This is where Plymouth will likely see the greater impact, not necessarily from a potential tornado, but straight line winds, even down near Culver too, likely probably going to see that. That is why if you're traveling along Highway 31, US 31, going from South Bend down south, it is going to get dicey very shortly as those winds start to intensify. The rain is going to pick up as well, leaving your visibility pretty much non-existent as you're traveling. You've got another minute or two, but if you know people this time of the day, 7:52, that typically drive that highway, this is not a time to be along US 31 between South Bend, Plymouth, even between South Bend and Rochester. Probably not a good time to be there.
No, absolutely not. And the other thing I'm going to check is hail right now, because there have been, the warning does state that there could be up to $half sized hail. And right now, the good news is radar indicated, this isn't ground truth, but this is radar indicated, is currently indicating that hail is at about pea-sized hail, which is not a major issue. You'll hear it dinging on your car roof or on your windows, but it won't be causing any major issues other than taking down some leaves on the trees if the leaves have come on yet.
Or even if you've gotten flowers that have already started to push through the grass, it may cause some of those petals to fall and things like that. Let's put the, not the velocity, the reflectivity back up there. Talk about where this storm is, especially now that we're seeing it move into southern St. Joseph
Looks like we have a second, let's see.
Just kidding. We're going to talk about this new tornado warning, which goes along with that really intense wind that we were seeing. So this tornado warning goes until 8:30 p.m. And it's for this part of the storm right here. So south of Plymouth, this is east of Culver, just between Culver and Argus. You could see that we're talking those wind speeds of around 70 miles per hour, but the rotation is very broad, but it's spinning enough. There's enough spin in this thunderstorm that a tornado is possible with that storm. It looks like you've got some new information for me, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. So the warning is for northwestern Kosciuszko and southern Marshall counties. This is a radar indicated rotation. So we have radar indicated rotation. The rotation was near Argos, or 7 miles north of Plymouth, moving northeast at 70 miles per hour. The two hazards here is the potential for a tornado and quarter-sized hail. So that's what we're watching for in this area. And right now, I believe, Lynette, you would agree with me, been saying this rotation looks much stronger than the rotation moving into St. Joseph County.
Yes, it does at the moment, but we don't want to discount what's going on in St. Joseph County. In fact, let's actually go back to that St. Joseph County storm, because again, while that rotation is not excessive, we have enough on there, on radar, that we're looking and we think, okay, there's definitely some of that concern. Specifically right now, it's near La Paz, but even just near between La Paz and North Liberty. That's where the rotation is very broad. But again, you have these bursts of very intense winds, and that's enough to pick up trees, uproot them from the ground, send them flying, especially, again, we talked about Highway 31 right here. That is likely going to be a not good place to be tonight.
And once again, we're going to switch back real quick to our Skycam.
Okay.
Located up in southbound top of the Fort Wayne Casino Resort in South Bend. And this does mean that if there is something in that storm, you will not be able to see it. It will be completely rain wrapped. So if you want to go outside or look at the windows on the front porch and try to see a possible tornado today would not be the day to do it, or any time really. This would be completely rain wrapped. You would have no way to be able to see any tornado. As we move around our Skycam, you can see that visibility is very low during this system. There is some very heavy rain, even some small hail possible going on, and you would not be able to see any rotation in this system or a tornado on the ground if there was to be one, simply due to the high amounts of rain and possibly hail.
Yeah, and that rain is lowering visibility all across the board. So whether we're looking for even just some formations in the clouds, you're not going to see that. Let's talk about that that second tornado warning, the one that was just most recently issued, because that, for one, is the newest storm, but it's also the one that's kind of recycling itself a little bit. So that storm has the warning until 8:30 p.m. It's for Kosciuszko County and for Marshall County, but this is why the warning is in place. You see where the green and the blue come together? It's small, but it is an intense area of rotation. Look at these radar estimated wind speeds of 94 miles per hour. That is likely going to cause significant damage. And then when you funnel it together with potentially 48 mile per hour winds on the backside of that storm, you could be looking at tornadoes, if they reach the ground, that could cause winds of well over 100 miles per hour. We're talking maybe 110 mile per hour wind gusts associated with those tornadoes. Let's clear those queries because I want to focus on that couplet where we're seeing that intense rotation. And we get a new update here. So just outside of Argus. So here's Highway 10 and here's 31. You know that intersection, it's got that flashing yellow light at that intersection. That is where the rotation currently is. So that means in the next few minutes, if you are east of 31 in Marshall County, you are likely going to need to take this time to get to your safe place if you're not there yet, because it's a small storm, but it's an intense one.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the National Weather Service has reported, I'm going to move up to our northern storm here,
okay,
that we have a reported wall cloud in Lakeville and St. Joseph County.
Okay, so we talked about how sometimes these storms, it's hard to see what's going on, but in Lakeville, someone did report a wall cloud. A wall cloud is what you need before you can get a funnel cloud or a tornado. When you have a wall cloud, it's a lowering in the thunderstorm where you have the thunderstorm, the wall cloud is the base of that storm, and then from the wall cloud is where you have the tornado and the funnel cloud. Again, that rotation is very broad, but you don't need major rotation in order to get potentially a tornado or even a funnel cloud to develop. The problem with this is you can't see what's going on because there's so much moisture, there's so much rain. If it's illuminated by lightning, that may be the best way to tell what's going on.
Let's have a look here. There might be a little bit of a correlation coefficient drop here in Lakeville and maybe in Argos as well.
All right, so let's
a little bit of bright yellow in
let's
these
look at the one in Lakeville first because this was the first tornado warning. So what this parameter is looking at, it is looking at different things in the sky and assigning a color to how big that object is. When you have those darker colors, more of the yellows, more of the blues, that would indicate that there's potentially debris lofted in the air. So again, that rotation is not very strong, but you don't need a lot of rotation in order to whip up some branches in the air, some maybe very small trees, things like that. So that's the northern storm. Aaron, let's go to the southern storm, the one that has that tornado warning until 8:30. So it has now moved that area of rotation to the east of Argus, east of 31. But that means that once again, Highway 30 is going to be an area of concern, especially toward Bourbon. That is probably the next big community that is under the threat of this potential tornado. Now, at the moment, Aaron, we still do not have a confirmed tornado.
Yes, that is correct. The National Weather Service has mentioned the potential for a correlation coefficient in the area, but they have not confirmed a tornado. Everything is still, at this time, radar indicated.
Okay, let's get rid of the query on this map and let's put the correlation coefficient back up there so we can see if we can find what they're looking at. Again, we talked about that correlation coefficient. The darker the colors, the more likely you have some sort of debris lofted in the air. So this yellow color, it's not very bright. Again, once you get closer to the greens, the blues, that's where you're going to get more of an issue and more of a concern.
The tornado warning for St. Joseph and Marshall counties has been allowed to expire. So this is our one tornado warning currently active.
Okay, so you just heard the all clear given for St. Joseph County, for Marshall County, for that northern storm. We want to be specific because parts of Marshall County, there's another tornado warning, the one that we're currently watching. However, I know it's 8 o'clock. I know that there's no longer a tornado warning in South Bend or Mishawaka, but staying inside may still be a good idea until these storms clear out. Let's put regular reflectivity up, Aaron, so we can get a sense of where the strongest part of this storm is when we look at the heavy rain. Right now, it looks like it is in between Argus and Bourbon. That is where the most intense part is, and it's moving toward Bourbon. How fast is that particular storm moving?
So that storm will be moving at 60 miles per hour.
All right, so that one's a little slower than that northern storm that we were watching, but just because it's slower, it doesn't mean it is any less damaging, any less severe. It's definitely something we will be continuing to monitor as the night goes on. Overall, though, we're still dealing with radar indicated rotation, right?
Yes, that's correct. And I put up on screen the possible times where this tornado warning in the area of rotation can be moving through. So around 8:03, Bourbon, 8:07, Etna, Greene, and 8:18, Leesburg. This is the approximate times where this radar indicated rotation could be moving over top of your area. We do not have a confirmed tornado on the ground right now. Nobody has seen eyes on it, but radar is telling us that there is enough spin going on right now in the atmosphere that there either could be a tornado here soon or there could be a tornado that we haven't seen yet.
Right, and we're staying on the air with you continuously because we know many of you are still picking up the pieces after the storms that we had on Sunday. And these storms, they're slower moving than the ones that we had on Sunday, but not just because they're slower moving doesn't mean that they're not causing issues. But this rain and the wind is very intense with this storm. Let's put the velocity data back up on this storm so we can get a sense of what we're dealing with. So this, in a sense, is showing, what is that? That's the wind speed and the direction, correct?
Yes, let me change real quick. Yep, this is it.
Okay, so when we look near Inwood, for example, that is probably one of the areas where we're seeing that rotation, or at least the potential rotation in this storm. And it looks like we're just getting a new update. There we go. So that looks a little cleaner.
That looks better.
A little cleaner, a little easier for us to decipher. So let's clear those queries out. And I want to draw a circle, Aaron. You see where that green and the blue are coming together, just west of Bourbon? That is where that area of rotation is right now. And that is what is prompting this tornado warning. It's small, but it's enough that we could be dealing with a possible tornado moving into Bourbon, for example, and along US 30 toward Etna Green and Highway 19, for example. Definitely a night where you'll want to take these warnings seriously, even if there isn't something confirmed on the ground just yet. You want to treat all of these storms and all of these warnings as if we have a tornado on the ground because they are moving so fast and that rotation is so quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, this area of rotation is moving at about 70 miles per hour. Bourbon, it is in your area, as well as Etna Green. Inwood, you should be in shelter as well. The areas we're seeing that light green and blue really close together is kind of our area of concern right now.
Let's keep the view where it's at right now because this has some pretty decent sized cities on it and we can give a sense of who is next for that storm. So it's just outside of Bourbon right now. If we travel along US 30, you've got Atwood. That is the direction this storm is likely moving. And if we continue to go to the east, you've got Leesburg. That's north of US 30. This storm does have a little bit of a northward pull to it. So I do expect Leesburg to see more of an impact from this storm rather than Warsaw, for example. Aaron is putting a track on this storm for you right now so you can get a sense. We've been talking about Bourbon. You're likely seeing that storm on your doorstep right now. We don't have a lot of cities and communities on this map because once you get to this part of our viewing area, you've got cities and communities that are very few and far between. A lot of that area is farmland, but that's why we're reading out those highways for you. A lot of people are familiar with highways. So if you are north of Etna Green along Highway 19, that is likely going to see either some very strong winds, probably well over 70 miles per hour, or even the possibility of a wall cloud, a funnel cloud, or even a tornado. Look at that query right now. Estimated wind speeds of 97 miles per hour.
Yeah, that's right. So whether or not there's a tornado on the ground right now, you need to be in your safe place. You need to be in an interior room of your home. You need to be away from windows. A good place for you to be right now would be an interior hallway of your home. Make sure that you cover your head. Wear a bicycle helmet. That's a great option. Or put a mattress over your head. The best place you could be is in a basement. If you have a basement, that's fantastic. We are currently live streaming on Facebook and our WSBT 22 news app. You can watch us there wherever your safe place is. You can take us with you and we will be with you until these tornado warnings have expired.
Right, so let's move this view a little bit closer toward Leesburg and closer to Warsaw so we can get a sense of where that storm is going, because right along 331, for example, that's where we're seeing some very intense winds. So not only do we have a tornado warning, we have a severe thunderstorm warning in place because the wind speeds and wind gusts will likely be well over 65 or 70 miles per hour. But it's specifically that area of rotation near Bourbon that is prompting an isolated tornado warning that it's technically still in the same area as that severe thunderstorm warning, but it's that part of the storm that has some of that embedded rotation within it. And this is actually right on the county line going into Kosciuszko County. So that's something that we're going to continue to monitor as these storms move to the east, bringing a lot of rain, some lightning, all that kind of stuff with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to bring us back to our general warning map real quick.
Perfect.
So you can see where everything's taking place. A lot of the area is under a massive severe thunderstorm warning. I want to talk about that real quick.
Yeah, of course.
There is a tornado possible tag on this severe thunderstorm warning. So that means that there could be an isolated spin up or two that we are monitoring for. $half size tailwinds, 70 mile per hour winds. So you do not want to be near windows for this. If you remember last Sunday's event, many people had parts of trees break windows. Windows were broken across the area from the high winds. That is a good reason why you should not be looking outside during these events. Make sure you stay away from windows and protect yourself from these storms moving through.
Let's keep this view where it's at, but let's pull the velocity up because I want to use that to talk about why we're seeing a fairly large severe thunderstorm warning. It's all because of those wind speeds. We're likely going to see wind speeds, as we talked about, 70 miles per hour as this line of storms is moving through. So when we zoom in right along the county line, so for example, St. Joseph and Elkhart counties, Marshall and Kosciuszko County, look how it's a very bright green and blue color. That is indicating straight line winds as this is moving to the east, but it's specifically in Bourbon where we're looking at that area of rotation that we're watching for right now. Look at what's going on right here to the east of Bourbon, where we have kind of that green and that blue. It's very isolated, a very small dot, but it's enough that that rotation is there. The latest scan shows it now moving into Kosciuszko County. It is north of Etna Green along Highway 19. And again, potential wind speeds outside of a potential area of rotation close to 100 miles per hour. But in that area of rotation, there could be localized wind speeds of about 120, maybe close to 130 miles per hour.
And we just talked about moments ago about that severe thunderstorm warning. Stark County, Pulaski County, LaPorte County, the National Weather Service has canceled that severe thunderstorm warning for you.
Okay, so refresh my memory then, Aaron. The only warning that we currently have is that tornado warning then?
Yes, and then they pretty much trimmed back that severe thunderstorm warning. So parts of the area that were just under that severe thunderstorm warning are now no longer under.
I see. So they trimmed back some of the warnings. So we still have those 2 warnings. One of them, the tornado warning for that area of possible rotation, specifically moving from Marshall County into Kosciuszko County now. But then we still have that very wide, very broad area of a severe thunderstorm warning. That threat is because of damaging winds close to 70 miles per hour. But it's that rotation that has prompted the tornado warning, potentially in parts of Marshall County and moving into Kosciuszko County. What is the latest that we're seeing with that storm, Aaron?
Yeah, we're going to take a look right here on velocity, and you can see that even outside of the area of rotation, as we try to get a new update in, winds are very, very high still.
They are still very high.
No matter if you are in the area of rotation or not.
There we go. There's that updated scan we were looking for.
The winds are absolutely cruising right now.
Yeah, so when you see something super bright like this tells us that we are dealing with straight line winds moving into northern Kosciuszko County, potentially anywhere from 75 to 90 mile per hour wind speeds. This is enough to cause major damage even without a tornado. Let's take the thought of a tornado out of this just for a minute, because 75 to 90 mile per hour wind gusts is enough to flatten trees. It's enough to rip walls off of homes, parts of roofs off of homes. This is heading to the east at a very fast pace. We're talking, what, 60, 65, 70 miles per hour, something along those lines? So all along this line, you're seeing 65 to 90 mile per hour winds potentially, and this is heading toward Milford, Leesburg, just north of Warsaw. I think the strongest of the storm is going to stay north of Warsaw. However, if you are traveling north of the town, definitely going to see some major impacts. So let's take the velocity data off and put reflectivity on briefly. I want to see what we're looking at. I know it will probably be a little bit of a mess, but sometimes this can give a sense of what we're dealing with. It looks like they just extended that tornado warning, but I want to leave it on here for a minute. Zoom in right here, if you see where I'm pointing, Aaron, right where you're seeing that inflow, this little appendage that we're looking at right here. We call this an inflow notch. When you get even just that little area right here where it kind of goes in before you get all that red, this is where there could be some very broad rotation. It's very small, but it's tight enough that that is where you could have a funnel cloud or even a tornado develop off of that storm. So there has been an extension of this tornado warning. It now is for Elkhart County, parts of Elkhart County, and Kosciuszko County, and that goes until 8:45 this evening. What is the latest information for that warning?
Yeah, absolutely. This is still radar indicated rotation, so we do not have a confirmed tornado on the ground at the moment. This is radar indicated rotation, and quarter size hail, a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado, was located 7 miles east of Bourbon or 7 miles south of Napanee, moving east at 65 miles per hour.
And it looks like Milford is included in this warning. Leesburg, Syracuse is included in this warning. North Webster is just outside of the tornado warning itself. But then as you get out of Kosciuszko County, Ligonier is included in this warning. When we look at what's going on in Elkhart County, we're talking areas south of New Paris and Millersburg. So it's the far southeastern corner of Elkhart County. And we talked about how this storm has radar indicated rotation. And when you see images like this on radar, that is very evident that there could be a possible tornado with this storm.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to get some damage reports now into the newsroom. In Argus, a tree and a power pole has been knocked down. So some of you might be without power right now. And this is proof that this storm is still packing a punch, tornado or not.
Right. And we sometimes don't get these reports of damage until well after the storm has passed through. But that's okay. We don't want those reports coming in during the storm because there could still be very active threats ongoing. So once the storms blow through, then you can assess the damage of what's happening in your neighborhood. But right now, the threat is for northern Kosciuszko County and far southeastern Elkhart County. Right now, you can clearly see that very bright green and blue color. That is radar estimated winds of anywhere from 65 to 75 or even close to 80 miles per hour. And regardless if there's rotation in this storm or not, this is enough to snap power lines, knock down power poles, knock down trees, send some branches flying across the area. So it's definitely something we're watching with this storm.
Yeah, I want to reset here for just a second.
Perfect.
Because they have trimmed down that tornado warning a little bit. Marshall County, you are now clear from that tornado warning, but I still want you to be careful. Don't go outside just yet, because many of you just to the east of Plymouth and near Argos, you are still under that severe thunderstorm warning. You could still see up to 70-mile-per-hour winds.
Exactly, and that's the threat with this. We've been talking about how damaging winds were going to be the biggest threat with this storm as we've seen the night go on, with the possibility of some isolated tornadoes. The good news is, and Aaron, you can back me up with this, as of now, we do not have any confirmed tornadoes in our area, but we have had storms that have had rotation associated with them, and for that reason have prompted severe thunderstorm warnings, but also tornado warnings. The only tornado warning we have right now is for Marshall County, for Kosciuszko County. Marshall County is in the clear, but far southeastern Elkhart County. You do see this flashing orange. That is a new severe thunderstorm warning. It is for the same line of storms that is prompting this rotation, but that warning is for more of Kosciuszko County, LaGrange County, and also extends into southwest Michigan a little bit. Let's widen the view on this, Aaron, and talk about the main threats with this warning.
Yeah, this new warning that just issued by the National Weather Service, the hazard is 70-mile-per-hour winds, it's radar indicated, and quarter-size hail. With quarter-size hail, you can start seeing dings in cars and windows. Wind damage is likely to mobile homes, roofs, and outbuildings. This includes the following highs of Interstate 69 and between mile markers 329 and 357. A tornado, once again, is still possible with this severe thunderstorm warning, so we could be tracking the possibility of some embedded spin-up tornadoes as the storm pushes through the area.
Speaking of embedded rotation, let's put velocity back up. I know Elkhart County, the warning itself for tornadoes is in the southeastern part of the county, but I want to focus on central Elkhart County right now, because when we look at velocity, as we look close to Elkhart and Dunlap, for example, outside of Goshen, there is a very broad area of rotation that I'm watching right now. It's right here. So south of Dunlap, it's very broad, but depending on what's going on in this part of the county, again, they are technically not under a tornado warning, but the severe thunderstorm warning that is in place highlights the risk for rotation in these storms where a tornado could be possible. Again, we're not seeing that widespread broad rotation, but it's just enough and just localized that definitely elevates my concern a little bit. While we're here on velocity, Aaron, let's go to the south a little bit where we're seeing that tornado warning in place, because that's where we're also seeing the threat for some gusty winds, potentially of around 70 miles per hour.
And we just received an unconfirmed report of on US 30 north of Bourbon, multiple semis may have been turned over from these high winds.
And with these wind speeds of 70 to 80, even close to 90 miles per hour, that is not a surprise. And they are due west winds. So if you're traveling north or south, that west wind is hitting you straight on, and that could cause multiple issues. All right, so we're going to travel farther south, right along Highway 15. You can see that's where we're seeing some very strong winds right now. This is where the tornado warning is currently in place. When we look at this, I do not see broad or even very tight rotation. However, that bright blue is enough that we could be dealing with some very strong winds as this line is moving through. It looks like you've got some new information for me, Aaron.
Yeah, sure do. Once again, more reports of some hail floating around. Pea-sized hail near the Elkhart and St. Joseph County line.
Okay.
Just north of Edison and County Road 12.
Okay, so that hail, again, we talked about how the threat for hail is there, but a lot of the hail that we're getting reports of in terms of the size has been sub-severe. It's enough to still cause damage, but severe hail is an inch in diameter or more. Tonight, the greater threat for severe weather looks to be the threat of damaging winds and even some very broad rotation. Let's reassess, kind of hit the refresh button, because I know people are probably coming and going as we have that threat for severe weather locally this evening. Let's highlight what warnings are in place right now and talk about that first.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have that tornado watch for parts of our area until 11 o'clock Eastern time tonight. Many of us right now are still under a severe thunderstorm warning. That is the orange color you're seeing right now on your screen. The main threats with that will be quarter-sized hail and 70+ mile-per-hour wind gusts. That is radar indicated at this time, and we cannot rule out an isolated spin-up tornado. And then also near Syracuse, there is a tornado warning that is radar indicated rotation right now, so we do not have a confirmed report of a tornado, but things on radar look like there's enough rotation right now that there could be something trying to form or has formed in the past that has prompted this tornado warning.
Right, and with these storms, I know it's a very localized area, and that threat may be away from your community right now, but parts of our area are experiencing the threat of either a tornado warning or even a tornado itself, or even the threat for some very strong straight line winds. So we are going to stay on the air with you as these threats continue to make themselves present, because after what our area dealt with on Sunday, this is definitely something we don't want to discount. Let's put the radar up and look at the different greens and the reds and all of that so we can see where the strongest of those storms are. So it looks like to me right now the strongest of the storms are moving through Elkhart County and Kosciuszko County. That's where we've got a lot of those bright reds, bright oranges, even potentially a little bit of pink on radar as well. So let's zoom in closer to the Elkhart and Kosciuszko County line, because as we can see, there is some very intense reflectivity between Goshen, New Paris. This is headed towards Syracuse. So Syracuse, if you are not in your safe place right now, you need to be. Millersburg, I know you are technically outside of one of the warnings, but I would definitely take this time to be in my safe place right now. If you're joining us from Ligonier, for example, that's another spot where I would be in your safe place, and this is going to continue moving, impacting parts of LaGrange County.
We are very quickly starting to get many unconfirmed damage reports in the community of Bourbon.
In Bourbon, do we know the nature of what type of damage we're dealing with, or what it looks like, or just damage coming in from Bourbon?
All we know at this moment is that there is damage coming from Bourbon. All this is currently unconfirmed. We are working to confirm that damage for you, but we have been made aware of potential of some damage.
All right, so when we get the latest scan in right here, you can see just outside of Millersburg, actually, let's go a little farther north on the radar so we can get a sense of where this intense bowing is with that storm. To us, this indicates some very intense winds that are just moving into Millersburg now or within another minute or two of seeing that move in. This is continuing to move to the east, so LaGrange County will see the impacts of that storm, especially as it's moving very fast at around 65 or even 70 miles per hour.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to change this over to velocity mode real quick to get a look and see how strong these storms are currently. And you can see there's some of those brighter blues just to the south of Syracuse right now. We're going to try to get an idea radar-wise on how fast these could be. Right now, radar is indicating around 65 miles per hour, but it gets a little tough to tell how fast those storms are currently moving because how close these storms are to the radar site.
Yeah, the radar is right here north of North Webster. If you've ever driven along 13, you've probably driven by the National Weather Service before. These storms are moving closer and closer to the Weather Service, and so there's probably going to be a minute or two where we see a little bit of a lag in the data or a gap in the radar coverage because those storms move over the Doppler radar.
National Weather Service has just canceled that tornado warning in Elkhart and Kosciuszko counties. They have noted, though, that you can still expect very strong winds to move through in the northern portion of Kosciuszko County and Elkhart counties in excess of 60 to 70 miles per hour.
All right, so if you did not get a chance to hear Aaron, if you're in Elkhart County and Kosciuszko County and you were included in that tornado warning, you are now in the clear for the tornado warning. However, the threat for very strong winds is still expected as the evening goes on with these storms rolling through. Although I will say Kosciuszko County, that threat is slowly eroding as it moves east of Syracuse and east of North Webster. We're going to start to see conditions improve. However, we have to keep LaGrange in the idea, or in the sense they're not done with the rain and done with the storms yet. They still have severe thunderstorm warnings.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to show the map right now of severe thunderstorm warnings and that tornado watch currently in effect for the area. You can actually see areas closer to Chicago earlier in Valparaiso were under that tornado watch earlier, and you can actually see now that that has now been trimmed back to include just our area. But you do see that very large severe thunderstorm warning. I'm going to give you the details on that right now.
So this looks very large on when you look at the graphic, but it is actually two separate severe thunderstorm warnings. The one that is farther to the west, that goes until, I believe that one's 9 o'clock, right, Aaron?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that one is 9 o'clock, and that one is for, I'm pulling up the counties right now. So eastern St. Joseph County, Elkhart counties, northwestern Fulton, northern Kosciuszko, and eastern Marshall counties. That is for the one that is to the west. The one that includes southwest Michigan and LaGrange County, that storm is the most recent severe thunderstorm warning. This one includes a little bit larger of an area, eastern Elkhart County. We include parts of Kosciuszko County, LaGrange County, St. Joseph County, and Michigan. So this is the one that starts to bleed into our Michigan communities a little bit. That warning goes until 9:30, so it's a little bit later. As these storms move through the area, though, we're going to continue to stay on the air with you because within these storms, I know the threat is mainly damaging winds, but there could be some isolated tornadoes or at least isolated rotation within these storms. So let's put the radar back up so we get a sense of where the strongest of those storms are currently moving. It looks like right on the Elkhart and LaGrange County line, that is where we're seeing the most intense part of the storm, at least for that newest severe thunderstorm warning we have.
Yeah, absolutely. You're probably noticing right now if you're near LaPorte, Knox, or Winnemac, South Bend, things are quieting down for you right now, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, areas close to LaGrange, Goshen, Syracuse, it's getting a little bit loud out there right now. You're under that severe thunderstorm warning. I'm going to pull up velocity right now to try to give you an idea on how fast some of these wind speeds are moving due to radar. And unfortunately, right where it's currently sitting, where the radar site is aligned, where it detects winds going from, towards, and away the radar sites, it's in a position where it's hard for us to get an accurate reading on how fast those wind speeds are. So we'll give you a very rough estimate here near Napanee, and we'll go south of Lima, 57 miles per hour and 39 miles per hour. So we definitely have some very high winds indicated by radar, but we're currently around severe levels of sub-severe level.
Right, but that threat is still there. So we're going to continue to show that. Let's put the radar reflectivity back up and highlight that area because we've got some major highways in LaGrange County. I know that we don't have many large communities like the size of Elkhart or the size of South Bend and Mishawaka, but you've got very well-traveled roads like Highway 20. You've got the toll road 120, for example. All of these highways are under the threat for seeing some very strong wind speeds of 65 to 75 miles per hour, especially right at the leading edge of this storm. You could see it just beginning to enter LaGrange County, and it's going to move to the east. What do we say, around 65 miles per hour?
Yes, 65 miles per hour.
Okay, 65 miles per hour.
I want to note real quick, Lynette, that we are getting a report of structure damage of a home on the east side of Bourbon.
Okay, so that is from that earlier storm that we were tracking as it moved a little bit away from where we're looking at right now. But that's why the damage is a little delayed. A lot of times what happens, you have the storms move through, and then after things are clear, things are quiet, that's when you can assess the damage. So unfortunately, it takes time to get those damage reports, but it is enough that I would definitely still take this storm seriously. Let's zoom in on where the most intense part of this storm is and put a storm track on it, especially now that we're entering a new county. I want to include some new communities in here. We can definitely see LaGrange, one of those bigger communities, but Clear Spring going to be under the threat for that severe weather as the storm moves to the east, again with a little bit of a northern push on it too. I'll step out of the way so you can see what's going on, but LaGrange will likely see that storm by 8:37 p.m. If you're in Sturgis, you'll be on the northern edge of this storm, But within the next 10 minutes, that storm likely going to be knocking on your doorstep, and it continues to move to the east, packing with it pretty big punch in terms of those winds.
Yeah, absolutely. This severe thunderstorm warning includes the possibilities of 70-mile-per-hour winds, and radar has definitely indicated that at times this evening. So we've also received damage reports as well from these storms, so we know that these storms have caused damage. They do have a punch to them, and so it is important to take these severe thunderstorm warnings seriously, especially since we have a tornado possible tag. Would you mind explaining what that is?
Yeah, so the tornado possible tag pretty much means that there's not any very broad area of rotation or localized enough that we can see a couplet on there. Pretty much the different colors coming together to indicate tight rotation, but that tag is there to tell us and to communicate with you folks that the possibility of a very brief tornado exists in this storm, so brief that in between radar scans, we may not get a chance to see it on radar or see it on velocity. It's that quick, so that's why we're keeping that threat for a tornado there.
We are hearing reports now on police scanners on US 30 near Bourbon. We mentioned earlier the possibility of overturned semis and lines down. We are now hearing reports that they are shutting down the road there to try to clear the road off.
And then are they shutting down 30 or?
Yes,
okay,
US 30.
So US 30 near Bourbon. If you are just tuning in now and trying to get those updates, it sounds like there is some pretty significant damage along US 30, enough so where they are going to shut down the highway to try to clean up some of what's going on. And when we look at what's going on in LaGrange County right now, it would not surprise me if we have similar stories to that as this storm moves through. The one saving grace is that where the strongest part of the storm is in western LaGrange County right now, it does not have the same strength and intensity that it had when it moved through Bourbon. But 65 or 75-mile-per-hour winds is enough to overturn semis depending on the load they're carrying. And if you're traveling on a north-south road, so for example, here's Highway 9, here's Highway 3, that threat is even stronger because you've got winds directly out of the west with these thunderstorms.
Yeah, absolutely. And just driving in general can become difficult. I drive a four-door vehicle, a sedan, and it's hard to drive in these types of winds. You get kicked around. If you drive something larger like an SUV or a pickup truck, traveling becomes that much more pickup due to the high profile of your vehicle.
Right. So it's definitely something we are keeping a close eye on as we see these storms move through.
We now have a viewer photo coming in out of Bourbon.
Okay, perfect. Let's take a look at this. So this is that same storm that prompted the tornado warning earlier. You could definitely see some lowering toward the horizon on that image. It is difficult to tell from this picture if that is fully on the ground or if that is just a wall cloud as it approaches from where this viewer took the photo. But definitely an eerie sight, and the reason why we do this coverage, because when you see things like that moving into your neighborhood, that's when, at that point, it is time to be in the safe place and not be outside.
Yeah, absolutely. From a still image like that, it's impossible for us to tell if there's rotation or not,
Right.
or if that. We also have what's called scud clouds, which can look scary. They can touch the ground, but they're not rotating, so it's impossible for us to tell if that is indeed a tornado, but certainly a cloud from a severe thunderstorm.
And if you have any photos like this, maybe you managed to capture something before the storms moved in your neighborhood, you can always send them to us on Facebook. We have multiple staff members that are monitoring our Facebook page tonight, and they can relay that information to us. Right now, though, the only alerts we have are severe thunderstorm warnings, and they go until either 9 o'clock or 9:30, but that is good. That tells us that the threat is weakening.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we do have a report from our emergency management in Kosciuszko County. NIPSCO pole lines are down across State Route 19 near 600 North in Kosciuszko County. So once again, we're continuing to see these reports of damage enter our newsroom from winds. Once again, very similar to what we saw on Sunday. Once again, lines down we've heard of multiple times. Potential for semis being knocked over. We saw that once again on Sunday. So we've certainly had a very strong line of storms move through, and that is coming towards you in areas like LaGrange. We're going to be seeing some of those very strong winds coming in here shortly.
I just wanted to zoom in on that because now that we have a new radar scan, we can clearly see the forward extent of that storm. That is where the winds are going to be the strongest. They're likely moving through Clear Spring right now, but LaGrange probably minutes away from seeing this intense thunderstorm with very strong winds, and enough that it could cause some issues on the roadways. You can see when we look at that velocity data, this yellow color indicates some very strong winds. Now again, this is radar estimated wind, but when you're seeing these numbers, 65, 75, even potentially 90-mile-per-hour winds, this is not a storm to mess with. So if you're in LaGrange or even east of there, you're definitely going to want to be inside. Be in your safe place because this is dangerous in terms of that wind speed.
Yeah, absolutely. When we start seeing winds estimated by radar this high, it doesn't mean that we are confirming that there's 91-mile-per-hour winds. That is a radar estimate. However, if we have winds up over 65 per se, which I imagine we would if we see winds that high, that is over severe level. So you will have a very strong to severe thunderstorm pushing through in the LaGrange area here shortly.
Right, so let's keep it on velocity, but I want to widen the view a little bit more so we can see right here. This is what I want. So right here where that circle is and this spinning line, this is the Doppler radar. It is in North Webster. How a Doppler radar works is as it's scanning the sky and it goes farther in terms of distance, that radar beam goes higher into the storms. So when you get farther away from the radar, when you get these intense signatures like this in terms of the wind, that may be reading the wind speed of the storm higher up in the sky rather than what's actually going on near the ground. We have to take that into account as scientists when we are seeing these storms move to the east. So closer to the ground, we're likely seeing those wind gusts of around 65, maybe close to 70 miles per hour, which is enough to uproot trees, knock down some pretty strong limbs, overturn semis. And that's why we are continuing to bring you those updates as they come in.
Absolutely. We're going to reset here for just a second to give you a broad view once again. You can see that we had two very large severe thunderstorm warnings earlier that include areas such as South Bend, Plymouth, Rochester. That has now been allowed to be canceled. All right, so I'm going to read off to you right now with that severe thunderstorm warning for areas like Syracuse and LaGrange County.
And this is the only severe thunderstorm warning we have in our area.
That is correct. This is the only warning we have.
That is good news.
Yes. This is due to winds that could be up around 70 miles per hour with quarter-sized hail. And one reason why we are still here with you right now is because this severe thunderstorm warning has a tornado possible tag on it, which means that the line of thunderstorms currently pushing through has the capability of creating some rotation and the potential for some spin-up tornadoes. So we are watching velocity very closely to make sure that we are in the know if that's going to be going on or not.
Let's put reflectivity back up. So reflectivity, for those of you joining us from home, that is the reds, the greens, the yellows, the oranges, your typical radar colors. When you have those darker reds, that's where we're looking at the strongest part of the storm. And right now, it's a little clouded and a little messy, but right through LaGrange and Sturgis is where we're seeing the strongest part of this storm. And that is where we're expecting to see those wind gusts of 65 and maybe even 70 miles per hour as it continues to move through St. Joseph County in Michigan, specifically the far southeastern corner, but then also all of LaGrange County.
Yeah, absolutely. We're once again, because we just saw moments ago some very high radar indicated wind speeds. So I'm going to zoom back in into the LaGrange area and take a look at those wind speeds as well as near Sturgis.
Yep, so in between Sturgis and LaGrange, you see that yellow color on the graphic right here. That is where the Doppler radar, which again is down in North Webster, is picking up some very intense wind speeds anywhere from, as you can see these numbers, 65 to 70, maybe even 80 miles per hour. Now, little Science 101 for you. As the Doppler radar is scanning the sky, as it goes farther out in distance, it's going higher in the sky. So this may be picking up on elevated wind speeds, but that still means these storms are moving very fast and likely bringing some very strong winds with it moving through LaGrange right now. Lima, for example, along Highway 120, the toll road in northern LaGrange County, but then also US 20. The good news is this is exiting our area. Once this storm moves out of LaGrange County and out of St. Joseph County in Michigan, that threat for us locally goes way down, which after several days of some rough weather, I think a lot of us are going to appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. It'll be very much appreciated. Once again, we're looking at that one severe thunderstorm warning. That's the only thing we are watching closely right now in LaGrange and far southern St. Joseph County and Michigan. Everybody else, you are no longer under a severe thunderstorm warning. All of our tornado warnings have been allowed to expire or cancel. You can see that our tornado watch is slowly shrinking. It's out of Illinois now and is now canceled in areas like Valparaiso. And you can see that our counties in Michigan, you're not under that tornado watch. So we are watching these storms very closely as I bring up reflectivity, move through the area, and some of the main areas we're looking at right now is near LaGrange. I'm going up and out of the area here very shortly.
Yeah, which is some good news, but anywhere from US 20 to Sturgis, right along US 12, for example, that's the corridor where we are seeing the most intense winds in these storms. So again, Sturgis to LaGrange and east, that's where the storm is now, and it's moving in that direction at a very fast pace. So for example, here's Highway 3. You can see that 120 sign. We want to go south of 120 and north of 20. That is likely going to be the next big roadway seeing that storm, and the latest scan shows us that right now, how quickly that storm moved to the east. Another thing I'm noticing with this newest scan, Aaron, if you want to zoom in along 120, we have another one of what's called an inflow notch with these storms. We're seeing such intense winds with these storms that you're generating a lot of that moisture into the storm, and it's causing a little bit of very broad, very minor rotation on the leading edge of those storms. So if you are right on the county line, you may see a wall cloud or a shelf cloud or some scary looking clouds as that storm is gathering more energy, gathering more of that moisture. And we're also seeing some very, very strong winds. Again, we've talked about the good news is this is moving out of our area. So I only expect us to be on the air for just a few more minutes, and we'll get you back to your regularly scheduled programming. However, we don't want to discount this wind threat. Again, this may be a little higher in the sky, but anywhere from 80 to 100 mile per hour wind gusts potentially associated with this. Again, we'll do a quick little math. I would not be surprised to see 65 to 75, maybe even close to 80 mile per hour winds at the ground as these storms are continuing to move through.
Yeah, absolutely. No matter if you're at 100 miles per hour or 65 miles per hour, it's still a severe thunderstorm. That still means you do not want to be near your windows right now. You don't want to be looking outside. We saw on Sunday, we saw a place where businesses had their windows broken out by the wind. You do not want to be near windows during severe thunderstorm warnings because say that glass breaks in at you, you now have flying debris coming at you in the form of flying glass. So it's best to stay away from your windows during this period of time and do not check out your damage until after all the storms have passed and your warnings for your area have been allowed to expire or cancel.
Right, and that's why it's taking several minutes, maybe even close to a half hour after storms move through for us to get these damage reports. A lot of communities are doing that safely, where they're waiting until the storm has pushed through before they're sending their reports and figuring out the extent of what's going on. So the good news is this threat is winding down, so we are going to only be on air for a few minutes more before this storm moves out of our area. Again, just the last remaining bit of LaGrange County and southeastern St. Joseph County in Michigan. That warning goes for another 45 minutes, but we have to remember it is a large warning. It's including not only LaGrange County, but also DeKalb County, Noble, Steuben counties, so areas outside of our neck of the woods and our coverage area, but it is still expected to pack a punch as these storms continue to roll through. Aaron, do we have any more damage reports from earlier as these storms have rolled through?
Yeah, right now we're not getting any more damage reports now. We do know that There has been a tree and pole down in Argos. We have an unconfirmed report of some structure damage near Bourbon. US 30 near Bourbon is currently being shut down due to some semis and power lines that have been overturned or taken down over the roadways. So we definitely have some disruptions going on in the Bourbon area right now.
And if you're in a situation where maybe you had a storm and you're waiting for the rain to stop to assess what's going on, even if we are no longer on the air with you covering these storms, but you still want to get your reports to us, you can always email the newsroom. You can send them to us on Facebook. We've got a staff that are monitoring that page, monitoring our phones and our emails tonight to keep you updated on what's going on. But let's widen this view just a little bit more to show you a sense of what's happening across the area, because as these threats are winding down, we may only be on the air with you for a short time longer. We do have a new warning that I want to touch on. It was just issued in the last minute or so, but it goes until also 9:30. This is for Cass County and for parts of Fulton County, or I should say Fulton County and Pulaski County. It does include Cass and White counties as well. Aaron, what is this storm being warned for?
Yeah, this storm is being warned for 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts and quarter-sized hail. And once again, just like many of the other warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings we have seen tonight, there is a tornado possible tag on this storm, which once again, as I've mentioned before, means that there is the possibility of this system of storms, or this little area of storms, to create some rotation in it and may potentially create some spin-up tornadoes in it. So right now, since we haven't taken a look at this area quite yet, I'm going to turn on velocity to see what is going on in that area.
And I actually like where you have that right now, because I can pinpoint on that map where we're seeing some areas of broad rotation. One of those is right on the southern extent of the county. So we're talking southeast of Francisville, where we've got the green and the blue coming together. That is some very broad rotation, but that is where we're seeing the possibility of rotation in this thunderstorm, or at the very least, some very gusty winds. There is also another area of broad rotation that is near Francisville. They're kind of two embedded areas, but it's all in the same storm, and that's why the threat is there. Again, there is no confirmed tornado with this storm, but the threat is there that we could be seeing some very intense winds and even a broad tornado, broad rotation with this storm as it moves through.
Yep, I am going to put a storm track for you right now on that area. This system is currently moving at around 60 miles per hour down in that severe thunderstorm warning. So I'm going to get the numbers put into our computer here, and then I'm going to draw out where this storm is going to be going and how fast you can expect it to reach. This is over the next 30 minutes. You can see by around 9 o'clock, Winamac, this storm will be coming up onto your doorstep. About 9/11 Culver, this system as well will be coming up towards you. We are seeing some very broad rotation. Now, there is not a tornado warning currently on this storm, but there is a severe thunderstorm warning, and they have tags on this storm saying there is a tornado possible with this system, which they issued probably because they also see the same broad rotation that we're seeing right now, Lynette.
Right, and with this broad rotation, it's safer to warn for a larger area that there could be broad rotation or even the threat of a possible tornado, because we're getting these radar scans every few minutes. And so in that short time between radar scans, there could be a recycling of that rotation, and a very brief funnel cloud or a tornado could touch down, and then just as quickly as it forms, it could be gone by the time that we get the next radar scan. So that's why that overall broad brush threat is there. But we're definitely seeing the signs that there could be some areas of rotation within that thunderstorm. What are things looking like in LaGrange County as this storm is moving out? I know this storm is exiting the area, but we still technically have that warning in place. We're still seeing some very elevated wind speeds when we look at Doppler rate, or when we look at velocity data right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the worst of the winds are now beginning to move out of our area. But
that's a good sign.
Yes, absolutely. But near Nottawa, we're seeing winds potentially of around 72 miles per hour, and that 100 mile per hour pops up. Now, this is all radar indicated. This is not confirmed 100 mile per hour winds. As Lynette explained earlier, when the radar is this far out, it's looking more up into the sky, into the atmosphere. So some of those 100-mile-per-hour winds could be 1,000 feet or so above our heads. But doing some quick math crunching in our heads, that tells us that there could very easily be 65 to 70-mile-per-hour winds hanging around in that area.
All right, so let's just kind of take a refresh. Let's look at the warnings that are currently in place. We'll talk about that. We'll look at the radar and then assess what we want to look at from there. But right now, we currently have 2 warnings in our area. The one that includes LaGrange County, the threat that has prompted that warning is moving out of the area. So that's the good news. But we did have another severe thunderstorm warning that did become an issue for parts of Pulaski County as well as Fulton County. That was issued at 8:42 and it goes until 9:30. Main threats with this storm is that of damaging winds like we've been talking about, but there is the possibility that there could be some very broad rotation within that storm. So that's something that they're warning kind of as a broad brush technique, but there's no specific tornado warning on that storm quite yet.
Yes, that's correct. And once again, we do have more damage reports coming in. This is from Emergency Management in Kosciuszko County. Tree and power lines are down across North Hillside Drive in Syracuse, and they have landed on a vehicle. We are unsure of any injuries at this time.
Okay, so these wind speeds we've been talking about tonight, strong enough to knock down power lines. It's very similar to what we experienced on Sunday. Now, the difference is that Sunday's storms were moving much faster. So they were in and out of our area so fast. This one is slower moving, so that's why the threats could linger a little bit longer. Aaron, let's put reflectivity back up, and I want to focus on that southern storm since that is the newest storm that has the warning on it. I want to focus on specifically southern Pulaski County because that is where we can see some pretty intense colors on reflectivity data. Just to the north of Lakeside, you see that really bright orange, a little bit of red. That is where the strongest part of the storm is right now. That is where the wind speeds could likely be close to 60 or 65 miles per hour. And that's also where we're seeing that very broad area of rotation. Right now, we're looking for where the blue and the green colors come together, but radar estimated winds likely at around 60 to 70, even potentially close to 80 miles per hour as this storm rolls through. And this is moving, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, is this moving east or northeast?
This is moving at northeast at 65.
Okay, so areas like Winnemac likely could be dealing with this in the coming minutes. Even as we approach parts of Fulton County, they are also included in this warning. The storm is still several minutes away from entering Fulton County, but definitely going to be looking at that broad rotation and those very strong winds making an impact there. Is there a threat for hail with these storms, or is it strictly wind?
Right now, we're currently not seeing any hail on our Storm Tracker Live radar from the system. If there's any, I would assume it to be pea-sized.
Okay, so damaging winds and rotation are still going to be the biggest threats as these storms roll through. I know that this is only for 1 or 2 communities, but it has been a rough couple of days across our area with tornado damage, with straight line wind damage. And so we are going to stay on the air with you as long as this threat persists or until the National Weather Service no longer deems this a threat. But it looks like that storm is now moving closer to Winnemac. It's not quite in Winnemac just yet, but it is approaching areas south of Winnemac, and that is likely where we're seeing the strongest wind gusts right now. They're warning for anything from 60 to 70 miles per hour, but we've seen report or at least warnings that include higher wind gusts.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen warnings that include higher wind gusts, and we've also seen damage reports that, go along with higher winds as well, such as trees down, power lines down. We've heard of semi-trucks overturned as well. So the winds are certainly one of the bigger threats that we've been dealing with so far. Earlier, we have dealt with tornado warnings as well near Argos and Bourbon. We have not heard of any confirmed tornado reports from that, but we have heard of some damage reports such as trees, poles, and some minor damage in those areas.
Right, and this is all part of a larger system that's brought severe storms from Indiana all the way down through the Mississippi River Valley. Locally, the reason why our threat was kind of wishy-washy, if you want to say. It was conditional on if we saw sunshine. And very late this afternoon and this evening, that's when we got the sun to break through the clouds. We didn't have a lot of time to warm before storms moved in, but it was just enough where we generated that instability and we got these storms to move in. It has mainly been our southern communities that have dealt with the storms, but right now, parts of Pulaski County and Fulton County do have the threat for damaging winds, especially as you go south of Winamac. That's where we're seeing the greatest threats. We're talking along 35 south of Winamac. That's where we're probably minutes away from seeing wind gusts, I would say anywhere from 65 to 75 miles per hour comfortably for what I would suggest for wind speeds.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're between Royal Center and Winamac, those two communities, that is where we believe the highest wind speeds are going to be ongoing as this pushes through the area. They are certainly going over 60 miles per hour, I would say. I would say anywhere up to 75 miles per hour is certainly a possibility.
Right, and again, we've talked about Doppler radar and how it reads the clouds and reads the storms. As that Doppler radar travels farther away from the center, that beam goes higher in the sky. So this may be picking up on wind speeds higher up in the thunderstorms, which naturally the winds are going to be higher as these storms build. But the threat for those winds to mix down to the surface exists, especially when you have those very strong thunderstorms. I would say right on the southern edge of the county line for parts of Pulaski County is where the strongest winds are. So we're talking Highway 35 between Winamac and Royal Center. That is where the most intense part of the storm is right now. That is where winds will likely gust to around that 65 to 75 mile per hour range. The rain is going to be very intense. The lightning is going to be intense. And it's also there where we could look at some very broad and very brief rotation. This storm, let's put a storm track on this because that's something we have not done with this storm quite yet. It's mostly been focused in Pulaski County because that is where the storm is, but you can see Fulton County is included in that warning. So when we put that storm track on there, we'll be able to get a sense of where the storm is going. So it's moving to the northeast, so I'll step out of the way so you can see where it's going. Rochester, one of the big cities in our community, you will likely see that storm probably by 9:11 p.m. if it holds together at its current speed and strength. Same thing for Etna Green. If it holds together, 9:25 is when you folks could be looking at that storm moving through as well.
Yes, and I know you folks in Etna Green are probably a little fatigued from the first storm that we had earlier today. That first round moved through your area earlier when we called out your name. But if this thing keeps going at the same speed and strength, currently it'll be going through your community at around 9:25. Now, once again, I'm going to read off the warning for you. This storm has the main threats are 60 mile per hour wind gusts and quarter-sized hail. Now, this is all radar indicated threats, but this also has a tornado possible tag on it, which we've been seeing some of that very broad rotation, Lynette, and that has prompted that tag to be put. There's not a tornado warning, but we're currently watching that very broad rotation to see if it tightens up and see if there's a threat of a tornado coming down the pipe.
So since we're talking about that, let's put the velocity back up so we can get a sense of what the latest scan looks like on velocity and see where there might be rotation. And right along that highway leading out of Winamac, 35 near Star City, that is where we're seeing that very broad rotation, or if not rotation, some very intense wind speeds. You could see some Doppler radar estimated winds of potentially 91 miles per hour. Now again, that may be elevated in the thunderstorm, but even down near the ground, that is going to be quite high. So this storm is moving into parts of Fulton County. So if you are along Indiana 14 and south, that is likely going to be the best spots to see this intense storm as it moves through. So Kewanna, for example, is likely going to be the next spot to see that intense storm. And it's one of those things where every few minutes we're getting a new radar scan. And so in between, you're seeing the storm is not stopping. It's not waiting for us. It's still moving. And so it's still evolving constantly. We're just getting one snapshot in time as these storms move through, and we get a following snapshot and we continue that pattern throughout the night.
Yeah, absolutely. And then once again, we've every now and then been coming in with more damage reports coming into the newsroom. Scattered reports now in Elkhart County of power lines down and scattered tree damage. So once again, unfortunately, like on Sunday, we're probably starting to see those power outages start to stack up as the system pushes through the area.
And there's that latest scan we were talking about with that velocity data. It was closer to Star City, so now it has moved east. It's very close to the county line with Fulton County, but having that little bit of a northward track, so along Highway 14, we're still seeing the impacts and the threats for dealing with those storms. Potentially 70 or 80 mile per hour wind gusts, maybe even close to 90. Now, even if this is straight line winds, not even including the threat for rotation or a tornado, 90 mile per hour winds, if that makes it down to the ground, we could be talking about a very intense thunderstorm knocking down power lines and power poles, not just the power lines. It could snap the poles themselves, knocking down and uprooting trees, taking some branches and limbs off of trees, making those fall in the road. Uprooting, we talked about the trees, but overturning semis possibly too, especially on those north-south highways. That is where the threat for semis to be overturned is much higher as these storms continue to push east.
Yes, I'm going to reset real quick because I don't want the people up in LaGrange County think that we forgot about in St. Joseph County. Most of LaGrange County is now out of that severe thunderstorm warning. It's been trimmed down significantly. St. Joseph County in Michigan, you are now out of that severe thunderstorm warning. Very few communities are now left in LaGrange County with that severe thunderstorm warning. So I believe that our main threat right now is down in our southern and southwestern areas.
Yeah, specifically near Winamac is where we're seeing the largest threat. That's where the winds are strongest at this point. And again, we're going to continue to stay with you on the air as this threat persists, because even though we currently do not have a tornado warning, these storms do have enough rotation in them that there could be some very brief rotation. There could be a brief funnel cloud or even a wall cloud that could be rotating. We're keeping an eye on this, but right now I think damaging winds are the biggest threat, and I want to put the velocity back on there to explain why that's the case. So specifically right on the county line between parts of Pulaski County as well as Fulton County, where you see that bright blue blob, that is where the most intense part of the storm is actively occurring, and that is where we are seeing Doppler radar estimated wind speeds of maybe 85 miles per hour. And that is moving toward Kewanna right now. So here's Highway 17. You can see that, and that's likely going to be a culprit for, or at least the target for the next area to be impacted by that storm. Even 31, once again, likely going to be seeing some very strong winds as the storm moves through. So Kewanna likely seeing that storm, if not now, in the next minute. Argus will probably be on the north end of this storm. But again, some very gusty winds could be expected within the next 10 minutes. I would say Rochester was probably the next largest community that could see the impact from this storm. If it holds together at its current speed and strength, likely seeing that storm within the next 10 minutes. And again, Etna Green, we've mentioned you folks before too, multiple times tonight. If this storm holds together, it may reach your community by 9:22. These are fast-moving storms, Aaron.
Yeah, they absolutely are. At last check, I'm going to read off the severe thunderstorm warning real quick to give you the speed. This speed of this storm is currently moving at 60 miles per hour, and wind gusts are of around 60 miles per hour. Radar indicate that's what the warning is calling for in quarter-sized hail. But once again, a tornado is possible with this severe thunderstorm. There is not a tornado warning out for this storm, but we are able to see near Kewanna and Lake Bruce, Winamac, some of that very, very broad rotation, which I'm sure has prompted that tornado possible tag.
It's prompted that tornado possible tag, but it's also been what's prompted that severe thunderstorm warning. Let's actually zoom a little bit closer to where that intense band is, right over US or Indiana 17. It's very bright blue. This is more of a situation and a scenario where we're looking at straight line winds, because you can see right along Indiana 17 potentially 80 to 90, maybe even 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts. The rotation is very broad. This is more of a threat for the straight line wind damage, maybe even a downburst or a microburst as these storms continue to move through. So Rochester is probably that next big city that's under the threat for this. I know that this is not necessarily a tornado warning, but I would get into my tornado shelter if I were in Rochester, just because these winds are so strong and straight line wind damage can be just as devastating as tornado damage.
Yes, absolutely, especially if you are in like a mobile home.
Yes.
Especially, we saw reports of mobile homes being damaged during the day on Sunday. I saw a picture from somebody whose mobile home was pushed 4 inches off its foundation by straight line winds. We can see windows being broken and these high of winds, as well as roofs damaged, trees knocked over. So you need to treat this seriously because these types of wind speeds are still faster than the speeds of some weak tornadoes.
Another thing I think we should point out too, here's Highway 31 just to the west of Rochester. There's that intense storm. There's not a lot of distance between those two. And Highway 31, as we know, it's a north-south highway, and these winds are coming in from the west. So that means high-profile vehicles, semis, there is a very big threat that we could be dealing with overturned semis as this storm moves through. So you can see we're within 10 miles of seeing that intense wind make it to Rochester. Now, the good news is when we look at that newest scan, it appears to me that it did weaken ever so slightly. It's still intense. We're still expecting wind gusts probably around 80 miles per hour at the leading edge of that storm, but we're not seeing the full extent of what we were just a scan ago. But we have to remember this storm is continuing to move even though we are not getting active updates until it's every few minutes. So that storm, it's moving even though we're not getting the updates readily every second, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And the good news is, I think you would also agree, the broad rotation has cut back a little bit in that last scan too.
Yes.
So once again, our main threat looking at this would be straight line damaging winds.
Right, but as we've talked about and as we've seen, and many of you have probably experienced, straight line wind damage can be just as devastating as a tornado, and it could even potentially be stronger. When we're talking 90-mile-per-hour winds, especially with this band of rain that we're seeing and the wind that we're tracking, if we're seeing confirmed winds of 85 miles per hour, for example, that's stronger than potentially an EF0 tornado. So definitely something to consider as you're maybe tuning in from Rochester, or if you have family and friends that are traveling along 31 between Argus and Rochester, it is going to get very intense here probably in the next 10 to 15 minutes as that storm continues to lift to the north.
Absolutely, and this warning does bring up the possibility of some hail. So I'm going to check the hail tracker right now and see if we're dealing with any. And once again, maybe that's pea-sized hail just south of Richland Center. So if there's any hail at all, right now it appears, according to Doppler radar, that it would be pea-sized or smaller, which the main damage that would come from that is, say, if you have any leaves that are coming back up on your trees, or if you've had some early blooming flowers come up out of the ground. They are at the biggest threat of seeing damage right now, but we're not talking about any major damage to property and whatnot due to the fact of any hail right now.
Yeah, definitely something we're watching for sure, and we're going to keep watching this, I would say, for a few more minutes, because this is a community that is on the southern extent of our area, but we do want to be mindful of what's going on across the area. So, Aaron, how about we look at radar first, and then we'll look at the warnings, and then we'll reassess and see what's going on and potentially get you back to your regularly scheduled programming, because we've been dealing with a lot out there tonight. So this is the radar when we see what's going on. The strongest of the storms are stretching from LaGrange County through Kosciuszko County and then moving into Fulton County, thankfully moving out of Pulaski County. Fulton County is the one area still dealing with those thunderstorms, the strongest of those just outside of Rochester right now. We have a severe thunderstorm warning in place until 9:30, so about another 20 minutes or so Damaging winds upwards of 80 miles per hour, probably going to be the biggest threats with this storm as it moves through. There is the possibility of seeing some rotation with this storm, but right now, damaging winds probably the biggest threat with that storm going forward.
Yes, absolutely. And we do have another damage report coming in. Also near Argos. We've heard Argos and Bourbon a lot in terms of damage reports. This is for Argos. This is from the National Weather Service. Lots of damage report east of Argos, Indiana on State Route 10, including trees down under power lines and large tree limbs snapped.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. Since we've been on the air with you continuously for a long time, and this is the last alert that we've got in place, we're going to wrap it up here, but know that if we have another tornado warning issued or another severe thunderstorm warning with these same threats, we'll come back on air, do a brief cut-in with what's going on. But again, if there's a tornado warning, we will be back with more information. We'll get you back to your regularly scheduled programming.
All right, what do you got?
Here's the really interesting thing.
Weeknights on Comet.
What is going on here?
Enter a world
We both know what's out there.
that exists beneath the surface
If you're hiding anything,
of what you think you know.
I don't trust you.
You have access to
we
it.
tell you only what you need to know.
And what lurks there will shock you,
I'm talking about close encounter mortality.
terrify you, and most likely
What?
abduct you.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
That is so you. That is so Scully.
The X-Files. Weeknights at 9, 8 Central on Comet.
The National News Desk is America's News Now.
Impactful news now.
About 30% of fatalities are because of alcohol-related crashes.
From nearly 4,000 local journalists across America.
Locally covered, nationally connected. The National News Desk is America's News Now.
Second-year head coach at Syracuse, Fran Brown.
I thought our practice 3 wasn't up to par. And they was like, yo, coach, you got to chill. I said, if you ever tell me chill again, you're going to get fired right there.
Damn, I'm a Fran Brown and Syracuse fan now.
I'm telling you.
Weeknights on Charge. The word on the street is
Murder.
Murder.
and every case has got something to say.
Anything else?
Oh, there's a lot.
Blunt force wound.
Blood spatter here. Stab wounds. Dead. So what killed him?
Do not disturb the crime scene.
Did we mention we're investigating a murder?
Tell us what you did. He said, she said.
You're trying to get me to admit something?
Killing him.
You're under arrest for murder.
Law and Order Criminal Intent. Weeknights starting at 9, 8 Central on Charge.
These truckers take on the unthinkable.
It's a little bit unnerving.
Driving a 2-ton big rig on a road of pure ice.
It's a lot more fun.
Ice Road Truckers. Weeknights on The Nest.
The legend of Rasheed Wallace continues to grow. He had everything.
And can shoot threes with his left hand just as good as his right.
You serious?
I was playing for the Bobcats, and they was beating us so bad that he started shooting threes left-handed.
Right now, the only severe weather alert that we're dealing with is a tornado watch. That means the ingredients are coming together for severe weather to move in and develop this evening, and it's something we're watching very closely as severe weather alerts, mainly severe thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings. They're moving into eastern Illinois right now. As we look at the big picture, we've got a line of strong to severe storms across Illinois and Missouri, even some isolated supercell thunderstorms in western parts of Tennessee, rather. But then you look closer to home, the Illinois-Indiana state line, this is where the closest thunderstorms are right now. You can see that even some tornado warnings. That's because there is enough spin in these storms that some brief tornadoes could be possible, but even if they're very brief, they are likely going to cause big issues. Locally, we're starting to see some of those thunderstorms moving over the southern tip of Lake Michigan into Berrien County. That is the closest we are seeing those storms right now. Even Michigan City starting to see some of those storms. I do expect more coverage within the next half hour of these storms, especially as we've got a warm front lifting through the area. You could tell that we've got a warm front because temperatures are in the 50s north of it and in the 70s south of it. It is 70 in Rochester right now, 61 in Knox, just shy of 60 in Plymouth, and 54 in South Bend. But down in Indianapolis, it is 80 degrees, 81 in Bloomington. That is where we're going to see likely widespread severe weather, central and southern Indiana. Here at home, we do have a brief window of opportunity from now through, I'd say, 10 o'clock, even 11 o'clock for our eastern communities where storms are likely. So let's talk about the biggest threats. Damaging winds still going to be the biggest impact, but tornadoes, hail, and heavy rain can't be ruled out. We've got those storms starting to move into the area as we speak, but from now through 8 o'clock, they're likely going to be widespread strong to severe storms with gusty winds and heavy rain, even some embedded tornadoes. When we get to around 11 o'clock, you can see that line pushes to the east, taking the strongest storms with it, but it is stretching from Michigan all the way down into the Mississippi River Valley. So definitely going to bring widespread impacts. By tomorrow, though, we are quiet. We may have a little bit of rain early, but otherwise we'll see temperatures at around 60 degrees. Tonight, those temperatures drop to 48, but for the next few hours, we're tracking those storms. Some of them will be on the strong side, so definitely want to stay weather aware tonight. By tomorrow, the temperature climbs to 60 degrees. While it climbs tomorrow into the 60s, we start to drop into the 50s and the 40s by the time that we get to the start of next week. Even some 30s possible for Monday and Tuesday, depending on where you are and what type of precipitation you're seeing by Monday.
Yeah, definitely some cold. I think most people, though, just want to make it through tonight first.
Right, and once we get through tonight, much quieter weather's on the way, with the exception of some rain on Saturday.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Yes.
Quiet. Lynette, thanks.
April is Autism Awareness Month, and this is how we get out. I want Maddox to see the world, and how can we do it? With Angel Sense. Who cares what people see when we go to the parks? Angel Sense gets us to the park, even though we have different behaviors. And we get there, and we play, and we break down, and we have meltdowns, and then we pull it back together, and then we keep playing, but at least I have eyes. Angel Sense is like an extra set of eyes for me. It has real-time tracking. It allows my family to see more of the world. Grab one too, so you could get out and explore with your eloper and feel a little bit more peace of mind. Get a free device with subscription purchase and see more of the world. April is Autism Awareness Month, and Angel Sense, this is how we get out, the only way.
Accurate. You're watching WSBT 22 News first at 4.
Good afternoon. First at 4, the threat for severe weather is here. Most of us have seen 2 rounds of storms already today. More are on the way. You can see our sky cams right now. The area is very wet, and that's caused ponding in fields and on our roads. take a look at why. This is our current storm tracker radar. We've watched storms move through today, some with heavy downpours. Abby, we know part of the area was downgraded, but it looks like maybe that has changed now.
Within the past 30 seconds, this level 3, the enhanced risk, did shift a little bit farther north, but still most of southwest Michigan and then northwestern LaPorte County are under a slight risk. So that has been downgraded. But yes, the Storm Prediction Center did up and move